Okay, thank you so much to everyone for joining us today for our community leadership and nonprofit panel. On behalf of the members of the Mount St. Vincent University Business and Tourism Department, I would like to begin by thanking you for welcoming us this biannual event. And sorry, I just lost my page here. I would like to begin by thanking you all for welcoming us this biannual gathering. As a descendant of the British settlers, I acknowledge and pay respect to the Indigenous people of the land from which we host today's meeting, the new Mi'kmaq people. I live and work on the ancestral, unceded, and unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I also pay respect to the knowledge embedded in the Indigenous custodian of this land and to the elders past, present, and future. My name is Caitlin, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this panel. For today's panel, we are going to offer some questions to all of the panelists, but panelists are encouraged to give their input at any time or comment on something another guest has said. If you have something to add, please feel free to contribute at any time. And I would like to hear from all the panelists at this time, and please share with us a brief introduction by telling us about yourselves, the organization you work for, and your position. And I will interject at this moment to say that we are missing one of our panelists. Bria McKinnon will be joining us hopefully later on, but if she does not come, we'll have Dana and Robert here to help us. But if she does come, I will also get her to do a little introduction of herself in whenever she does show up. But until then, maybe I'll pick on Robert. Can you give us a little bit of an introduction first, please?
Sure. My name is Robert Haldane. I work for Digital Nova Scotia, which is a not-for-profit based out of Halifax, Nova Scotia. What that company is it is the sector council for the digital industry in Nova Scotia. And for those who don't know what a sector council is, it's almost like a representative body that's not a government body. It's a kind of a not-for-profit body, but there's one for every kind of work group around the province. So there's, forestry as an industry, there's a forestry sector council, automotive as an industry, automotive sector council, digital sector council. So that's where I work, and that's what we do. We work quite heavily within the digital industry of Nova Scotia. My role is the director of operations there. So I'm responsible for kind of chiefly three main things. The first is project management. So as an organization, we're kind of first and foremost membership driven. We have over 200 members that we represent and work with on a regular basis. But we also host kind of a portfolio of about 15 projects that are all kind of designed to both kind of boost entry into the digital industry and also actually help a lot of digital adoption from the digital industry to other more traditional industries. So we've been quite busy during COVID with a lot of digital transformation for small business and various sort of activities like that, which has been really great. So that's kind of one tenant. The other is business development. And I'm sure Dana will talk about this a lot too, but as not-for-profit, something that we're always doing is kind of looking at where our next kind of funding or grant proposal will come from. So we're also kind of looking at new ideas for driving value in the industry or growth for businesses, or what we can kind of proposition to kind of keep the revenues flowing in for us. And then lastly, business finances. So as kind of part of my role managing the projects, which are kind of the vast majority of our funding pool, I also kind of oversee all of the not-for-profits kind of overall business financials.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And Dana, would you mind giving us a little introduction on yourself, please?
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks so much for coming today. And I'm coming to you from just outside of St. John, New Brunswick, a place called Quispamsis. And it's on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq and Wolastoq peoples. I am a fundraiser, and I've been working as a fundraiser for almost 10 years now, and right now I'm working for a really great organization called Community Forests International, who is based in Sackville, New Brunswick. And the organization, we basically work to mitigate the effects of climate change by enabling people and forests to thrive together, really recognizing that we can and are a very critical part as humans, a very critical part of the climate solutions that we need in today's very crazy world. If anybody's been paying attention to COP26, so yeah, I guess we're gonna go into it a little bit later about more of my story of how I got into this field of work, but um, just to say that there are so many charities out there that are doing such great work, and I'm really excited to be able to be a part of that environment. So.
Thanks so much, Dana. Since my next question is, how did you come to work in nonprofit? How about I'm going to pick on you since you were just about to touch on that. So how did you come to work in nonprofit? What's your background? Was your education driven towards that experience, or was there any one experience that led you to work in nonprofit?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when I was younger, I thought I was going to be a fashion designer, uh, totally different. And then when I was in my late teens, I ended up having the opportunity to travel abroad. And I went to India, and my perspective of what the world was and what my purpose should be essentially just oops, sorry, touched my computer. Changed like that is what I was going for. And I really felt like I wanted to do something that was going to have a more positive effect on the world at large. And so I ended up going to Dalhousie and studying international development. I did a minor in journalism. And then I thought, well, what am I going to do after that? And I ended up kind of just by circumstance ending up with a summer job as a canvasser, a street canvasser. So, for those of you in Halifax, you've likely seen folks along Spring Garden Road saying, "Hey, got a minute to talk?" That was me. I worked for a local organization that you might be familiar with called the Ecology Action Center as a canvasser, and quickly fell in love with the opportunity that I had every single day to have meaningful conversations with people who care about the environment, which is obviously an area that I'm incredibly passionate about. And I completely fell in love with fundraising, and every single day being able to come to work and be able to be seeing the difference that I was making by fundraising for an organization that I truly and wholly to this day still believe in was a really powerful experience for me. And I think because I enjoyed it so much and because I had the really amazing opportunity to find myself in a position doing something that I didn't just think was a job, it was more than that. I was able to take on more and more leadership positions over my time with that organization. And I ended up actually working with the Ecology Action Center for about 7 years, and worked up to the community giving manager role. So at that point, it wasn't just canvassing, it was also, supporting online campaigns, end of year giving, supporting major donors, legacy donations, which is like, when you leave a gift in your will, peer-to-peer fundraisers. So now I've had the opportunity to have a wide variety of experience with such a hodgepodge of different fundraising programs, and that's been really fun and kept me really engaged. And I feel like just really grateful to have had the opportunity to have had such a diversity of experiences. And so to loop it back to my education, it ended up, I kind of fell into fundraising by accident. And I didn't really actually need to, in the end, have that degree to find myself in the career that I did. But it was just this past fall, actually, I decided I wanted to take my education to the next level. So I actually went back and became a certified fundraiser through the CFRE program that's offered. And so with that program now, it's kind of like getting your trade or your ticket if you're like in the trades. So I feel really proud of having accomplished that last year. And um, yeah, I guess did I answer all of your questions?
You did, yeah, thank you very much. I think it's really interesting. Every panel that we've been doing for Career Week, there's always some sort of tie-in that happens. And one thing that I was noticing with yours is what you were saying is that you had that experience working outside of university part-time in the summer, and that's kind of what drove your interest to work in the future. And one thing that all of the other panelists have been saying as well is that having a broad range of things and kind of dipping your toes into things and trying things like a summer job or volunteering can really impact your future career a lot. So it's nice to hear that reflected in what you said. And it's really interesting hearing from the broad range of different careers that people have, seeing how things really tie in and how everyone has kind of the same thought process with their roles and how they got to where they are. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and like I cannot second that enough. Like really having the opportunity to have a summer job where you try something out and see how it fits, see if it's something you could really envision yourself growing into. That's an amazing opportunity, and I really hope that people do their best to try to align themselves that way when they can.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And Robert, what about yourself? Did you always know that you wanted to be a nonprofit, or how did you end up in the nonprofit sector?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I actually fell backwards into it pretty much, but I'm really happy that I did. So I had almost very not unconventional, but a bit different. I graduated my undergrad about 10 years ago, scarily enough. So a little time ago. But I came out of my undergrad at St. Mary's with a degree in economics. And I just presumed I wanted to go into some sort of business. Kind of, muddled around with my friends and started a landscaping company and did that for a little while. And that was kind of fun. And my, full experience with computers was, going online and looking at job ads and checking my email, but not significant by any means. And then I worked out west for a while, basically kind of chasing the money out to Alberta, and worked on the oil rigs, which was a really interesting experience. And I'd say it was probably about, 2 a.m. minus 30 degrees working outside. And I said, you know what, maybe I should go back to school. So I kind of made the decision that, I didn't necessarily want to work in those conditions for very much longer. So I went back to school, did an MBA at St. Mary's, and came out of that. And I moved into a management and leadership development program with a telecommunications company. And that was really great because it sort of allowed me to go through various aspects. So I started out in kind of customer care, and then I was in operations, and then I was in kind of back end servicing, and I ended up in product management. And for those of you who don't know about it, because it is actually kind of niche, product management is a really interesting career path. I would encourage anyone who's kind of interested in broad business to get into that, because you really focus on both the analytics of the product, and then you're kind of looking at how that product moves through the huge business. So if you take a telecommunications company and you have, say, internet, you've got the sales piece of internet, you've got the setup piece of internet, you've got kind of the back end cords for the internet, and then you've got kind of everything else from accounting, marketing that goes into it. And so what a product manager does is basically sits in their own department, and they just look at that service of internet, and they can say, okay, well, we're selling it great, but we're bad at installing it, but we're really good at marketing it. And so they kind of look at that picture, look at the data, and say, okay, we need to focus on improving our installation, for example. Whereas maybe it doesn't seem evident, but when you're in a big business, it's kind of like sales are sales and marketing is marketing. whereas product, you really got that whole holistic picture. So it was quite interesting. So I really, my strengths were kind of finance, economics, bit of accounting. That's kind of what I wanted to get into more. And then really working more closely with people and leadership. So I did that for about 5 years, and then I was looking for other options. And this not-for-profit role came up at Digital Nova Scotia, and it just seemed like a really great opportunity to join a small team where I'd get to wear kind of multiple hats at once. So I'd get to kind of play in kind of all those various things that I really wanted to try, but wasn't really able to get sort of hands-on into. So it was really quite interesting. That's how I kind of came into this position. And now that I'm in for not-for-profit, it's a really nice place to work. Yeah, quite happy.
Wonderful. I like your comment about moving out west. I feel like that's just the classic Maritimer migration. Everyone either goes out west, or when you're older, the migration becomes Florida. But with the state of, yeah.
I was trying to think, like, maybe not anymore, but if there's like, say 50 people in this call, it's like, okay, I know 2 of you probably are going to do what I did and maybe come back in a few years.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It seems like my family's all from Newfoundland, and pretty well all of Newfoundland goes out there. It's funny. Well, thank you. Since I have you present and already talking, I'm going to ask you my next question, which is, what is something that you find the most challenging about your position or about your work in general?
So 2 things, I guess. One is with my role as Director of Operations, a lot of what I do day to day is kind of work within the budgets and look at kind of how our projects are progressing. And so again, not-for-profits kind of, I guess, maybe the big drawback or the big challenge is usually that the kind of where you're getting your revenues kind of to support the team is sometimes, a bit questionable and a bit more, that's the focus. So very much so, it's kind of looking at what projects we have on the go now, what revenue do we have coming in now, how is that going to play out over the next year, where are our next projects coming in, or our next boosts of revenue, and how is that going to kind of support the team and flow it out. So a really, really big challenge that I'm pretty much always measuring is kind of how are we progressing on our projects? How is our cash flow looking? Do we have other projects in the pipeline that are going to come on so we can continue to support the team? And really, like, one of the big challenges there is it's suddenly you get 3 huge projects that have all been in the works for 4 months. And it's like, okay, now we have to hire 12 people today. And it's like, okay, 12 people. And then it's like, okay, now when we know in about a year and a half, we need 3 more big projects to keep those 12 people. Because the last thing we want to do is become cyclical. So we're hiring 12, having to let go 6, hiring another 6 months later. Like, it just, being consistent is very, very challenging, I think, is what it boils down to, if I could rework that. And then the other really big one, especially when you've come from bigger businesses, is that there's really no prescribed structure in kind of small businesses. I think maybe especially not-for-profits. So for us specifically, when I started, we had kind of 6-7 people, and we're up to about 21 now. So we've had some really incredible growth over the last 2 years. But there's no necessarily structure that's already in place. So it's kind of like we start something and then it's on us to figure it out. And we have maybe done it before, maybe we haven't, maybe some of us have done portions of it, but it's really a much more collaborative environment because there's no one who necessarily knows the answers. Like, I'm not going to a salesperson who's been doing this for 15 years and saying, oh, this is how you handle clients. It's kind of like, here's something that's happening, and everyone kind of looks around and goes, how do we deal with this? And we have to just kind of stick and move and, controlled chaos, get through it sometimes. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's harder, but it's a challenge, but it's always interesting.
Wonderful, thank you. And I have another follow-up question, I guess, that I just thought of, and it's only really applicable to you, Robert, as I know, Dana, you've always been passionate about nonprofit and always worked in that sector. But Robert, what has been like the biggest shift from working in not-for-profit now versus working for like for-profit companies or corporations before? I know you were saying the difference between like a larger organization versus a smaller, but is there one particular thing that you found difficult with that shift from corporate to nonprofit?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think the difficulties I highlighted were there. I think the other thing Just trying to think of the best way to articulate this.
Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, but I was gonna say, it's challenging in a not-for-profit sometimes, because you are such a small team that I kind of touched on. You can't turn to someone for answers. I mean, you can always figure it out. My boss is the CEO, and so he's a very excellent, intelligent guy, and he will always provide solutions. So there is resources if you need them. I think an interesting thing, this for anyone who's on the call and maybe hasn't really experienced this, when you work at a really big company, if you're in, say, a call center, you're one of maybe 200 folks. And so let's say you like that job, but you're sick. You might say, I need to take a sick day. Oh, well, maybe I'm kind of letting it down a little bit, but ultimately I'm one of 200. So the work is pretty well dispersed. If you're not there for a day, no one's really going to notice. But when you're on a smaller team and you get that really good team cohesion, and you think like, maybe I'll take a sick day or two, and you suddenly realize, you're 10% of the organization. So if you take a sick day, that's a pretty big impact on like everyone and everything in a sense. And so it's like I feel guilty if I'm sick. Like, you feel like you have to work. And I would say that the people who report to me, there's zero pressure for them to work when they're sick. It's like, please stay home, don't come in, rest. You guys work super hard. But you just like, people feel this obligation to not, let down the people they're working with, it seems. And they don't want to then not come in, even if they're sick, because they're like, well, I told so-and-so I would have a meeting and I told the other person I'd do this. And it's like, don't worry, all of that will come. And so I feel like maybe you guys in university, it's always painted as like this evil capitalist system, you can't take breaks. But I almost found like in the capitalist system, forget you guys, I'm sick, I'm not coming in. But here it's like, I don't want to let my, the people I work with down. So it's an interesting challenge to kind of work around that aspect of it. It's half answering your question. But
No,
yeah.
that answers it, because I was thinking more so on the difference between the larger corporation versus like the smaller nonprofit, and you really answered that, which I think what you're speaking to a lot is like the pressure of like helping hold up this organization that is doing good things. And I think it's a good type of pressure, but like you said, sometimes it can be a little bit daunting when you have a bad cold and you want to stay home. So thank you for answering that. Dana, for yourself, what do you find challenging about your work and your nonprofit organizations?
Yeah, well, our organization has, like so many others, like pretty much any organization that exists, has a strong mission. There's so much work to be done, and it's overwhelming on the easiest of days. And there's just never enough resources to be able to do all of the things that we wish that we could accomplish. And so, quite simply, it's resource scarcity. And that's, in terms of my role, how I'm very directly involved in helping to navigate that issue. But there's just it's like there's never really enough money to solve all of the problems of the world. And for donors as well, they have to make the decision about the changes that they want to see, and the things that they want to invest in. And sometimes that's the work that you're doing, and sometimes that's the work that other folks are doing. And so, yeah, that would definitely be the most challenging, I think. Boldly, the reason why charities exist in the first place is because there's lapses in terms of where the government is supporting. If there wasn't a homeless issue, we wouldn't need to worry about charities that deal with homelessness. If there wasn't an environmental issue, as is in my case, working for an environmental charity, then we wouldn't need to have organizations protecting the environment, trying to help mitigate the effects of climate change. And that's really applicable for any cause or mission-based organization. And so, It would be a dream to be able to come into the office one day and, the executive director says, actually, we don't need a fundraiser anymore because we have all the money that we need. Then we could, in this capitalist society, solve all of the world's problems theoretically. And it's not that that money doesn't exist in the world. It's how it's allocated. So.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a dream, but you would be out of a job still, though. So
I would happily just mow people's lawns with a push mower all day.
Yeah, sometimes I feel that way too.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'm gonna pick on you again because you're right here.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about the types of jobs that might be available for students who are interested in kind of breaking into the nonprofit world?
Totally. And the good news is that for folks that are interested in this, more people are employed. And I don't have the exact numbers on me right now, but more people are employed by the nonprofit sector in Canada than there are in oil and gas. So there are like almost endless opportunities if you're looking to get involved in this sector. Obviously, fundraising is one that I think is just so great, and every single charity is going to want at least one fundraiser. But, particularly with our organization, having like forest ecologists is important to be able to identify like what kind of trees and different flora and fauna are in the areas that we're working to protect. I think that in the last couple years in particular, it's become increasingly important to have strong communications. PR is a very coveted position at almost every organization because at this point, especially in this COVID world that we're perpetually living in, we're not having this conversation in person right now. We're having it over Zoom, and we need to make sure people know about it. And how are we going to get the message out? And then further than that, how are we going to communicate with our audience more generally? And I think that it's just so great to be seeing so many people studying things like PR because we just have to be able to communicate our message. If we fail to do that, then we can't expect to gain any traction within our organization. So I think that that's a really big one. But truly, there's finance, there's policy, you can specialize in anything from like sustainable energy to active transportation to, water quality and monitoring. I could literally just list things for an hour. But if you are interested in the nonprofit, like there is space for you. And of course, I'm sure we're already familiar with, websites like Good Work, for example, or Charity Village that are specifically looking at how you can do a job that also makes a difference. So I would encourage people to seek out those resources as well if that's something that they're interested in pursuing.
Great, thank you. Actually, it's nice to hear you mention the type of backgrounds that are needed because this is a business and tourism department that's putting this off. And I think a lot of the positions that students may potentially be looking for really can tie into a lot of nonprofit. Like we do have community leadership programs as well within the business and tourism department, but really even if you're in marketing or in business administration, like all of that can really tie in. Like Robert, you're saying that you have your MBA, is that right? Which is I'm sure a lot of students here are interested in doing that once they're finished with their bachelor's degree. And it's nice to know that there's always room for people that's needed in different sectors. Yeah, thank you. And Robert, what about yourself? What are some types of jobs that students could look for when they're looking at breaking into the sector?
Yeah, I think any entry-level job in not-for-profit, the skill sets tend to be very similar. You want someone who wants to work at a not-for-profit or seems to display some sort of interest or passion for the role. and you should be articulate and good communicator. So I think based on who you said's on this webinar right now, I'm sure you guys are all ticking those boxes. So kudos to you. Yeah, our specific organization has kind of a variety of roles, the biggest of which are project coordinators, because we have such a kind of big focus on projects, but we also have marketing coordinators, and we have membership engagement coordinators. So all three roles are really, really great break-in roles for learning a ton of great skills. They're not dissimilar in a way. You do a lot of kind of communications back and forth. You go between people, and you set up things, you introduce webinars, you kind of meet people, make connections, kind of learn how to talk and write emails, and kind of understand how people communicate day to day. Not that you don't obviously already know that, but sometimes there's a little bit more nuance behind it. But yeah, they're great roles. They're awesome experience. I know some people will say, be careful working for a not-for-profit because it might pigeonhole you into like a certain type of experience. But I mean, if you look at where I came from, mine was product management, but pretty much all of those skills were transferable into project management and what I'm doing now. And I don't foresee any difficulty whatsoever trying to go back the way if I ever wanted to, with kind of what I've now built as being a not-for-profit, with kind of the finance experience and the operation experience. And same with Dana, if she's got a good history of funding, there is, numerous both public and private companies that are interested in people that can raise money. I can tell you that. So it really, if people are saying don't do it because it pigeonholes you, I would almost say the opposite, because with a not-for-profit, you get almost a wider breadth of experience because they do typically be smaller teams. So we've had Mount co-op students, and they've done their own projects that they've been responsible for, and then we're super busy, so we're asking if they can put marketing collateral together, and then we're super busy, so we're saying, can you go and kind of like liaise with these folks that we're trying to work with, so that you can get a really well-rounded experience going for a not-for-profit for your co-op.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Robert. That's a great point.
Actually, that's another thing that has been brought up continuously during these panels, is the desire to have students who are applying that have like a huge, well-rounded background of like dipping their toes in everything and trying different areas that are interested in them. Because a lot of the panelists, like yourselves, you were just saying, were interested in finding co-op students who are not just good at one thing, who kind of show that they have a broad range of talents that they may have gotten from their experience working in nonprofit or so on. And Robert, like you yourself were saying, you wear like 10 hats. You're a small company, a small organization, and you have to be included in different things that are going on, whether or not it's in your background, because you're 10% of that organization. And I think if anything, having that background in nonprofit really shows that you do have a very broad range of talents. So I think having a co-op, if students are doing co-ops here that are in nonprofit, really can be very beneficial. So think about it. We actually just had a question from Nora Perry, who's one of the faculty here, and she sent me one in the chat. So I'm going to ask you guys this and see what you think. This is on the type of models that are used for the organization. Like, how do you get funding? Is it through corporate donors or individual donors? Is it government funded? What type of funding do you get? And I'll start with Dana here.
Yeah, me.
The fundraiser.
Yeah. So it's a wide variety, really, and every charity is different in terms of who they will accept donations from, and that might depend on their donor policy, the kind of organization that they are, et cetera, but generally speaking, you can collect gifts from the government, donations from the public, grants from foundations, stocks, securities, gifts of estate, and I think what we've really learned in the pandemic is that diversifying where your revenue streams are coming from is optimal, because you never want to be fully reliant on one source. If you do that, then you're going to find that you're more vulnerable. So the more that you can diversify your revenue streams, then it means that you're going to be more secure in the nonprofit.
Sorry, I was on mute there. Rob, what about yourself?
Sure. So yeah, funding is always interesting. It definitely, there's a very wide variety. I think probably Dana and I have different parameters by the sounds of it, even though we're both not-for-profits. So our funding is a variety of ways, but the vast majority is project grant-based funding. So we have a membership base of just over 200 members. They pay kind of what you'd call almost a nominal, and I mean, it's not nominal, it's a few $100s, so it's a significant amount of money, but for us as a business, it's kind of 2% of our revenues. And then as the sector council, the government of Nova Scotia kind of gives us a bit of core funding to say, kind of as your role as sector council, here's kind of a pot every year that basically kind of keeps the lights on, so to speak. Again, not a huge amount, but enough to keep us going with a certain amount of people. But what we really depend on for our lifeblood is both mainly federal and provincial grant funding. So it kind of comes in three ways. As I said, so Digital Nova Scotia represents the digital industry. Maybe I should have kind of clarified this at the beginning, but digital, when I'm saying digital, isn't coding, it's anything digital. So marketing people, you're almost entirely in the digital industry these days with Canva and all the other various tools you use and online marketing. And same with kind of anyone who's on a computer all the time. So really the digital industry is kind of people who are focused in digital and building and coding, but then it also encompasses any business that really has a huge portion of their business that's digital. So if you do a huge amount of e-commerce sales, you're doing a lot of digital business. Or if you're Sobeys, for example, you probably employ 200 digital people just to keep your own business going. So you're quite a digital employer in yourself. So there's about 25,000 people employed in the sector. But interestingly enough, when you look at how it's molded, it's kind of a third of that is in digital and 2/3 of that is kind of in other businesses that touch on digital but don't quite. So it's a constantly evolving dynamic, which is part of the reason it's so interesting. But it's actually our second biggest import in Nova Scotia, export, which not a lot of people know, but behind lobsters, it's digital technology.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's interesting. A lot of our biggest members don't do any business in Nova Scotia. It's nuts. They just work exclusively with the large international players. And getting involved in digital opens your eyes so much more to see kind of even 2 to 3 person organizations that are based out of Yarmouth. They might be working with a bank in the US. There's no stopping kind of who your clients can be if you have the right connections. So it's really interesting in that way. Side tangent. So to come back to the funding, we have kind of 3 main ways we look at funding. We have kind of continuous projects that we have on the go. So a big thing for us is to say, we've been doing this project for 2 years. Here's kind of the results we're showing. It's really great at what it's doing. We'd love to do another version of this. So like 2 years are up, can we do another 2 years? And we try to kind of snowball, keep things moving that way to keep kind of projects going and funding coming in, either with sort of federal or provincial government funding. Another way is new propositions. So if we've been working with a funder locally for, say it's the local government, we've been working with them for 4 or 5 years, we have a bit of a connection. And so we might be out and say, hey, here's kind of a proposition for you where we think we can do X, Y, Z, and it'll cost X amount of money. What do you think? And sometimes they'll say yay or nay. And that's another way that we kind of land projects. And then the third really big way is that most federal funders will do calls for proposals. So they'll typically have kind of an area they're looking depending on the federal funder. So you might take ESDC, for example, is one. I don't even think I can tell you what that kind of breaks out to be beyond ESDC, but they're really focused on skill building. So they'll do kind of a call, say in the spring, they'll say, our focus on this call is we want to see XYZ skill building to create 500 transferable skills into jobs for people. So they would say, you've got 3 weeks to basically tell us how you're going to come up with a way to give 500 people the skills to get a job. And we would kind of go off and say, okay, well, we're digital, so it has to be within the realm of digital Nova Scotia and our province. And so we would kind of take that and then submit that, and then maybe we would win that project. So those are kind of our 3 federal and provincial funding methods. And
Awesome.
sorry, Caitlin, I obviously like the sound of my own voice today, so I'll just keep rolling here. So, someone else asked a question. Is public relations complementary career to HR and management?
Let's we're actually, I just got an email back from that question and about the nonprofit, like how important is public relations. I know a lot of students are taking public relations who are in the Learning Passport program, which is the program that is putting off Career Week. So I think some people are maybe interested to hear how they can get tied in with nonprofit as well.
Public relations is huge. It's a really good degree to have, because again, one of the really big things, if you think about what I just said, a lot of writing proposals. So if you're coming out with a public relations degree, it's almost like an authentication that yes, you're a good writer and you know how to use grammar. So like seeing that on a resume, it's like, okay, you already have the communication skills and the writing skills down pat, which is a huge part of any job. So I would say it's really good. Complementary, yeah, absolutely. If there's one of every 3 of those degrees, you're not going to just get the job because that's your one, but it's definitely a good one to have.
Wonderful, thank you. And what about yourself, Dana? How important is public relations to Community Forests International?
It's critical. It's everything. Again, like it's how we get our message across. So if we aren't able to communicate effectively, then we're not going to be able to tell people about all the fantastic work that our charity is doing. And so, yeah, I see that also as a huge benefit to any organization, including Community Forests International. And then in terms of like HR and management as well, it's all the same, right? In terms of if HR is people management, right? And when you work for a nonprofit, you're working with a community of people, and whether you're in a specific HR role or you're just working with a team, being able to have those skills to manage dynamic group environments is absolutely key to being able to be the most effective as a member of your organization, and generally as an organization as a whole.
Awesome, thank you so much. And what about for yourself? What are some challenges that leaders are facing in the nonprofit sector?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I've already spoken about resource scarcity, and so I won't go into that again because you already know how I feel about it. It's critical that, we fill in those gaps as much as we can. But additionally, I think, and more generally with leadership and the nonprofit sector, one trend that we've really seen since the pandemic is retention of really good employees in the nonprofit sector. So there's a lot more competition now, especially as the sector continues to grow. There's a lot more competition for the folks that have been with it for a few years, who, have some experiences. And I think there's never been a better time to get into the nonprofit sector because it's becoming more and more important when we look at the kind of society that we're building. The role that nonprofits are playing is becoming more and more critical. And so getting into that field, then the challenge to leaders, so we're talking about directors and the CEOs of different charities, etc. It's really about retaining those good quality employees. And the nice thing about that for folks that are considering a career in the nonprofit is that one of the ways that retention is that folks are trying to maintain retention is by helping to support the continued development of folks who want to build their careers in that sector through, professional development, through, making sure that there are adequate compensation for the positions that they're doing. So I think holding on to the folks that are most valuable is absolutely clutch right now. And any good leader should be paying attention to maintaining their star employees.
Wonderful, thank you. And what about yourself, Robert? What do you think is a challenge faced by leaders in nonprofit?
I think, yeah, as Dana said, the funding challenge is kind of the continuous effort of a not-for-profit that just kind of never goes away. So that's probably the big one. As far as other challenges, I'm not sure it's too much different outside of any other business. I mean, it really comes down a lot to resource management. People skills and relationships are always critical. There's never a day where there's not a misunderstanding of some sort that needs to get smoothed over. Yeah. Sorry, no, that's not very.
No, that's okay. That's okay. You don't have to have a perfect answer for everything, especially if we've already touched on it a little bit already. So thank you. Maybe I'll take you to our next question, Robert, which is, how did you, well, I know actually we already answered this, which was, how did you get into the nonprofit industry? Which we know you already worked a little bit with oil companies, and then you kind of shifted after your master's degree. So I'm going to skip that question and go on to our next one, which is, what do you like most about your work with nonprofit, and what do you dislike about it?
I think what I like most about it is it's always a challenge, and I feel like I'm learning, and no day is ever exactly the same. And I know that sounds kind of cliche, but again, there's something really nice about being on a smaller team where you're all in it together, and you're kind of working a lot more cohesively, I find, than you ever feel like you ever get when there's 100 people around you, because you just don't have that same interdependence. And so it is really nice, and it's really interesting just to kind of experience what's going on every day, see the new things. You're never tired, you're always learning. That's the other great part. I don't feel like I'm ever stagnating. Like, there's always new challenges, new things. I'm either learning something new about digital that I never knew before, because I had zero background in that. Or you're learning kind of a new way to work with people or communicate or how to negotiate differently. There's just lots of opportunities, again, to be involved in many different areas and kind of hone a lot of different skills and learn things.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And Dana, what do you like or dislike about your work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think Robert actually said it really well. In almost 10 years in the nonprofit sector, I have not had 2 days that are the exact same. And as somebody who really likes variety, as somebody who really likes to learn, I have had no shortage of opportunities to stay engaged and try new things and meet new people. Every single day is different, and I love that. That's part of the reason why I choose to stay in the nonprofit sector as well. In regards to the work that I get to be a part of doing, I feel so grateful for that. I feel so grateful to be a part of the environmental movement, and I see that as a legacy that I'm very proud to be making for myself and for my family. And so it's something that I find really fulfilling and engaging, but also really heart-filling for myself. I find it's very satisfying on the intellectual and emotional levels.
Very
Yeah,
good.
that's an excellent point. And almost there's your double-edged sword, where it can almost be a dislike, but it's not, where it's like you're so much more bought into what you're doing, and the impacts around you are so much bigger, and you actually feel like you're achieving something or doing something of good in a sense. And that might sound overly cynical, but if you're one person doing something in a bigger company, it's a little bit different. for example, we did a digital adoption program that was to help tourism businesses in COVID, where we said pair tourism businesses that really need a lot of help getting websites and generating online sales and doing those pieces with digital consultants out of the digital industry. So it was great because we were helping two industries at the same time, and one was really hurting because of COVID. And so we kind of had these $5,000 grants, about 300 of them say, and then we had 300 tourism companies that all came in. We were able to say, here's your $5,000. We're going to pair you with this person who's a digital expert. They're going to build a website for you. They're going to teach you how to market online, and you should see a really good improvement. And so not only did we get the feedback from people being like, this is incredible. I didn't know I could, reach customers. I'm so grateful you've helped me turn around my business at a hard time, which, makes the day a lot better. But the other thing is, you drive down the South Shore and you're like, oh, we helped that business. We helped that business. We helped that business. And it's really nice to feel like you've done something worth, like, I've never driven down the road and been like, I sold them a TV package. They bought cable from me. It's a really different feeling.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And in a world where we are so constantly inundated with bad news, it's great to be able to remember that there's a lot of really amazing things happening around us, and there's a lot of momentum around that. And so, yeah, you want to feel good, you want to be a bit more of an optimist. Try working in the nonprofit.
All right, you guys have me sold. Let me know when you need someone in, I'll be there.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So my next question for you both is, have you ever considered leaving nonprofit and going somewhere else? I know nonprofit isn't always the most fulfilling for I suppose the best way to say this is you don't always get the most bang out of your buck. Sometimes it can be a little bit disappointing, when you don't get that donation or that grant you were looking for. Is there ever a time where you felt that you wanted to move on to something that's a little bit more secure or a little bit more stabilized? Like what do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I started in the nonprofit when I was 22, fresh out of my undergrad, and I'm in my early 30s now. And so just in terms of the experiences I had, I definitely have had that question come up for myself. Do I want to have a experience outside of the nonprofit? Would I like to try something else? And I think I'd be a liar if I said that I never thought about it. I think it's completely natural to think about what your options are. However, I gotta say, I'm really, really grateful for the choices that I made to actually stick with it, because now having 10 years under my belt in a similar field, the only way that you can ever become an expert at something is by sticking at it. And I don't know if I would call myself an expert yet, but the skills that I've been able to learn in this period of time, I wouldn't have it any other way. And before joining the nonprofit sector, I did a lot of hospitality type jobs and things like serving in particular, lots of serving. And I really enjoyed getting to talk to strangers in that environment as well. But it just, for me, nothing is as fulfilling as the kind of work that I do now. So I'm glad that I've had so many years of being able to do what I really love the most.
Wonderful. Thank you. Great answer. And what about yourself, Robert? Is this something that you've ever considered?
Yeah, I think every kind of role is something you need to think about, kind of where you are in your life, and is this meeting what you need and what you're hoping for, and kind of ticking those boxes from you. Have I thought about going back to private industry? Not yet. At least I've only really been in not-for-profit 2 years, and I've been kind of not enjoying every day, but certainly enjoying a lot more days than I ever did when I was in a private industry. So it's more interesting. There's I don't know if it's a certain degree more freedom, but the culture is obviously significantly different in most not-for-profits versus most private industry. And I imagine, there's probably not a lot of like massive capitalists on this call, but I will tell you that like I came from oil and gas. I had no problem being like, I will achieve, I'll be the finance guy, I'll work 12 hours. And like you do that and you get not a ton of gratitude, if I'm honest. And like it's a long time and you start to question, is this worth it? Is this what I want to do? You're not making $1 million down on Wall Street, so maybe you're not seeing the return you maybe thought when you were in your late teens. And then you get an opportunity to work for a not-for-profit, and maybe the hours aren't any different, but you'll like the people you're working with. It's a much different atmosphere. There's maybe less corporate type pressure, if that makes sense. Like it's maybe a bit more relaxed atmosphere. Yeah, it's really good. And I thought, Caitlin, maybe you danced around it a little bit, I would say, but from a compensation point of view, not-for-profits definitely do have a reputation of maybe paying a little bit less than private industry kind of across the board. And whereas that is probably true, certainly as you kind of get higher in the ranks, maybe, a not-for-profit CEO probably doesn't make as much as a for-profit CEO, but there are also the trade-offs that come along with that. So it's really just, where are you and what suits you? And one thing is consistent is if you're adding value, people will recognize that and they'll compensate you accordingly. So it's not a sacrifice as you may have been led to believe.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And yes, thank you for answering that question. I was trying to dance around that a little bit. Wonderful. Well, my next question for you is for any students. Well, this one is for any students who are potentially graduating and looking to maybe do a co-op with one of your organizations, if you have those positions, or if you do have an opening available. What are some things that stand out to you both as hirees for things that that appeal to you about those resumes? What are some things that students can do to make themselves look more hireable, I guess?
Yeah,
I'll start with Robert, if that's okay.
Yeah, a couple things, I guess. I'm fairly new to the hiring game. I started hiring people maybe about 1.5 years ago. However, in that time, one of the big things that we looked at is the federal and provincial government are quite generous at the moment for what they'll do with businesses to bring on co-op students. So a lot of not-for-profits and other businesses can get basically 50 to 60% compensation for bringing you guys on for a term. So it's a great, as a not-for-profit, getting kind of 50% on the dollar for the labor, no offense, is a very, very interesting perspective. So we actually bring on kind of 4 or 5 co-op students every year now, or every semester. So we have done quite a lot of interviewing over the past 18 months. Yeah, and it is really interesting to see how sort of some resumes stand out and some don't. Certainly a cover letter, I know you've probably heard this 1 million times, is critical, because if there's 100 job applications, the 30 with cover letters are going to be read first, and the other ones are going to be if you get to them. The other big thing I would say is coming out of your undergraduate degree, no one hiring you expects you to be a professional already. So I know sometimes you're thinking like, I don't have enough to maybe sound as good as I would like it to sound on my resume. And I think some of the things that gives me the biggest laugh is I have about 10 years experience in project management, and then I'll get resumes from undergraduate co-op students and they'll say 10 years significant experience in project management. And I'm like, okay, interesting. You have more experience than I do. Okay. And like, not maybe you do, but don't feel pressure to try and say you've done a lot more than you have, in a sense, or don't feel pressure to try and big it up. Like, we know you guys are undergraduates, so really just focus on, this is the cover letter, this is why I want this job and why I'm passionate about it. Just have a really good resume. So if you have kind of job help assistance offices and stuff on campus, go there and get your resume vetted. That's always a good move. I didn't do that when I was in my undergrad, and I probably submitted 200 resumes without a single call. So definitely take advantage of those. I was foolish and did not, and my resume reflected that fact. And lastly, if you're interested in doing something that's, say, and I'm sure Dana will speak to this, but if you're interested in, say, funding, or if you're interested in, say, project management, say in your cover letter, kind of like, I'd love to work for a not-for-profit, this is great. But say you're also interested in that type of career. And it doesn't really matter if it's one of those that you've taken out, I would like job X because I'm really good at Y. Like, really, that's fine. You know, no one's expecting you to put in 2 hours of work for every cover letter. But say what the job is, say what you're looking for. And if you can take any extra courses, that will always reflect really good in your favor. So project management, if you're super into project management, you have an undergraduate degree, and then it shows that you've done, you know, a Google course on digital project management. That's a very small thing, let's say, as an example. But that kind of extra 10 hours of course, if I'm looking at your resume, really shows that, like, okay, you've got the lip service that you want to work here, but here on your resume, it actually shows that you have done some courses that kind of proof the two together. So I'd say that that can really stand out for folks.
I'm going to say something totally different. I'm going to say, you know, and those are all good points as well that you have, Robert. For the resumes that I see, what I'm looking for first and foremost is that you're passionate about the cause. And of course, you know, with fundraising, you can't fake that. You have to authentically believe in the mission of the organization. But, you know, there's lots of people that maybe have more experience than you, like Robert was saying, especially being, you know, in university or freshly graduating from university. Lots of people have more experience than you. But what makes you stand out? And I think that one of the great things that we see with a lot of young folks is that they bring a lot of energy and enthusiasm and passion. And in the nonprofit, we can never have too much of that because our work is hard. It's, you know, emotionally rewarding, like we were saying, but it's also, you know, we need the cheerleaders. We need the people that are going to, you know, make it fun to come to work, whether virtually or in real life. The people that can see the vision and are excited to help move us towards that direction. So I think that passion goes a really long way, and a little bit of creativity as well. Maybe you don't have years of experience in something like project management, but you know, maybe there's a way that you can authentically share the unique experiences that you've had, either in your cover letter or in your resume, in a way that shows that maybe you have some transferable skills that would enable you to be a good candidate for the position. So in fundraising, the value of being organized is actually really key. And that might not be something that you think about, but if you can't keep track of deadlines, if you know, are just not really organized with things like that, it can get really chaotic really quickly. So, you know, those soft skills are also very important to emphasize as well. Yeah, and also the other thing is save some things to wow us when you get to the interview stage. We don't want you regurgitating everything that you shared on your resume. We want to, you should save a couple nuggets to wow us when you get to that interview phase.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. That's really interesting to see the different perspectives you both have, considering you do come from two very different nonprofit organizations. So I guess we kind of got a little bit of a look at the different types of hiring process the both of you look for, because Dana, of course, you do work for a nonprofit focused on climate change and forest. So it's nice to see the different ways that people can potentially change their resume to go to different sectors. And yeah, that's really nice. That's why whenever we have panelists, we have people coming from different sectors so that we can get that insight. It's nice to see it. Thank you.
And Dave made an excellent point there that I'd like to stress, that if you're applying for an entry-level job, it's true. Like, a lot of the skills you will be taught when you're on the job, if they're job-related skills, what is really important and what a lot of hiring managers are looking for is those transferable skills and that kind of like soft skill background that just shows that you're a capable individual and you can work on a team and stuff. And a lot of those skills don't have to come from, again, I was at Google for 10 years as an IT executive. You can say I taught scuba diving lessons to kids, and it really taught me a great way. I had to work with parents. I had to assure them that their kids were safe with me. I had to learn how to educate kids. We'll look at that and say like, yep, you must be pretty good at, communicating with different groups of people, which is a great skill to see. So yeah, it all plays out. You just have to be a little creative sometimes.
Yeah.
That's a piece of advice I actually just got from someone when I'm doing an interview, the exact same thing. So it's nice to hear that reiterated as well.
Exact same example and everything?
Almost, actually. It was, I have some experience teaching ESL and in a classroom setting, and I'm applying for a managerial position once I'm in a co-op right now. And they said, no, you tell us about that because you're able to manage a classroom. Like it is transferable skills. So very, very similar.
The one thing when you're working is sometimes if you're a project manager in a bigger business, or in any sort of business, but you'll work with a group of people and your manager won't be the same manager as the other people in the room. So the only way you're going to get the people to work with you to kind of do what you need them to do is through kind of communication and making that bond and being able to kind of talk and understand people and know what they need and know what you need to communicate well. And yeah, these are things that just come with being able to talk and work with folks, and you don't need to have some sort of strong technical resume in order to say you're good at those things. You can highlight those skills through working at school. You did a lot of group projects. A bunch of people just didn't show up. So how did you get them involved and engaged and get them on your group projects? There's a lot of different ways you can show that you're good at those kind of entry level transferable skills.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'm going to ask you all one more question. What particular skills or attributes or training can make a candidate? That is exactly pretty well the same question I asked about the question. So what I'm going to ask you is, are there any final thoughts or anything, any pieces of wisdom that you can share with students who are, potentially thinking about a career in nonprofit sector?
Yeah, well, this isn't an original idea of mine, full disclosure. But a long time ago, when I was first entering the sector, I heard that sort of like famous line that if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And so that's something that I feel, yeah, we're getting paid to make positive change in the world. It's really fulfilling, and it doesn't feel like work every day. It's pretty special. So if you want to work in the nonprofit, if you are connected to the cause that that the nonprofit is doing authentically, and you have a drive to make a difference in the world, then definitely consider it. And also, LinkedIn is a great resource for reaching out to people in sectors that you are interested in. And a lot of folks you'll find are really open to talking about their own experiences and their own paths. So that's something that I've personally done, is reach out to folks in my network and expanded my network to learn more about the careers that people that I admire have found themselves in their journey to that point. So there's a lot of ways that we can be connecting with people and learning more about what we might like or not like, and what's involved in that. And everybody's journey is different as well. So my journey and Robert's journey is not going to be the same as yours, and that's kind of cool and exciting as well. I don't know, that was like 3 different things, but
Oh, it's good. You gave us 3 pieces of advice, so it's good. Thank
Yeah.
you. And Robert, what about yourself? Do you have any final thoughts or pieces of wisdom to share?
Uh, not, not a lot of wisdom comes out of this end. Final thoughts, I would say. Um, I know it's sometimes obviously daunting to think I have to pick a career path and that will be my career path for the next 40 years. But it really doesn't play out that way, I would say. And kind of like, it's obvious you guys are way more sophisticated than I ever was, even 10 years ago in your shoes. But for every one type of job you can think of now, there's probably 10 more variants of sub manager of this and controller of that. So I would say just kind of find something you're interested in,
Mm-hmm.
pursue that if it's the type of work, if it's the type of skill set you're hoping to develop over your career, and then just continue to sort of chase that and analyze if that's kind of where you want to be or and you feel you're still growing as an individual. And then if you're not, kind of look around internally if you like it, but don't be afraid to switch businesses or anything like that. I know sometimes if you're in one industry or one business for 5 years, it sometimes feels like moving can be a big change, but it's really not too bad at all. So I'd say you'll get there as long as you just kind of keep working on yourself and developing your skill sets.
I love that. Yeah, great point.
Wonderful. Yeah, you both have been amazing. Thank you so much, especially since we have 2 panels today when we were supposed to have 3. So you guys have really taken up the torch a lot. So cannot thank you enough. And on behalf of everyone here today and on behalf of Mount St. Vincent University Department of Business and Tourism, we would like to thank today's panelists for being part of our Fall 2021 Career Week. Connecting students with industry professionals is a win-win for everyone, and the real life experiences you bring to the students are really an integral part of their education and future success. So thank you again for your time, and thank you everyone for attending today. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend if you have tomorrow off or so on. And for all the students, enjoy your reading week. I'm very jealous. I wish I had a reading week. And thank you everyone. Have a great night.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.